The history of Great Tartaria. Tartaria was a vast empire of united countries across Asia, existing from approximately 1200 to 1850. With the greatest part first united under the conquests of Genghis Khan and Mongol Tatars from 1205 to 1227, his sons continued expanding after his death until the Mongol peak in 1279. In the later years of Mongol expansion, infighting resulted in the division of the empire into individual hordes, from the Turkic word orda, ordu, meaning army or seat of power, royal court. But in the late 1300s, early 1400s, Tamerlane, a descendant of Genghis, consolidated power in the southern part of Asia, aka the Timurid Empire, before marching on to the Mongol capital of Kambalu and reuniting the Turco-Mongols again and establishing the Empire of Great Tartary. Tracing their lineage back to the ancient Scythians, the Tatars claim to ultimately descend from Turk, the eldest son of the biblical Japhet. Their name Tartar is derived from an ancient Scythian king named Tatar Khan, just as the Mongols derive their name from Mogol Khan. From the 1500s through to the 1700s, numerous maps of Tartaria were made by Europeans based on the information brought back from emissaries, missionaries and merchants, the only people allowed in, with special permission, as Tartary was a country closed to foreigners. While neither Genghis nor Tamerlane ever conquered India, in the 1500s a man called Babur, a descendant of them both via the Kutlu Khanids, ultimately did and established the Mughal Empire, finally adding India to the Empire of Great Tartaria. At some point, though when exactly remains unclear, Tartary colonized parts of the west coast of America, establishing the kingdoms of Anian and Quivira in modern-day Alaska and California. It's possible these came about as a result of Hokata Ogadei Khan's conquests in 1200 to 1241. However, it's also recorded that during the reign of Kublai Khan in 1380, one of this naval squadrons which set out to invade Japan was caught adrift at sea and ended up wrecking on the Peruvian coast, establishing the Inca Empire. Although Kublai conquered China and established the Yuan dynasty in 1271, over the following centuries many wars were fought between the Tatars and the Chinese, and they weren't always part of the Tartarian Empire. From 1368 to 1644 the Chinese gained independence from Tartary under the Ming Empire. It was under the Ming that the most famous part of the Great Wall of China was built, although multiple walls had been built by both Chinese and Tatars dating back to the 300s BC. But in 1644 the Manchu Tatars regained control over China and established the Qing dynasty, which lasted all the way up to 1912. From 1580 to 1778, Muscovy, seeking to break free of their Tatar subjugation, began to move east and slowly conquered the great region of Siberia, committing a great deal of genocides along the way and establishing the Russian Empire. Siberia then became known as Muscovite Tartary. This provoked a hasty military response from the West, who now saw the steadily weakening Tartarian Empire, and Britain joined in the power grab. First infiltrating India via the British East India Company in 1757, and then infiltrating and weakening China via the Opium Wars from 1839 to 1860. This rivalry between Britain and Russia over control in Central and East Asia became known as the Great Game. It resulted in the certain fracturing of the Tartarian Empire into multiple parts: Russian Tartary, Chinese Tartary, independent Tartary. Eventually, the only region of Tartary that remained autonomous was independent Tartary in Central Asia, but cut off from the ancient capital of Kambalu in Manchuria, it wouldn't be long until independent Tartary fell to the British and Russian empires. After the Communist Revolution in Russia and China, and the establishment of the USSR and PRC, Tartarian history was intentionally hidden, erased from history books, and no longer taught in schools. The Russians and Chinese did this because they didn't want their history to reflect that they'd been subject to another nation for centuries. The Brits and Americans did this because it was simply profitable, and Tartary became no more than a blanket term for a vast part of Asia. But in recent years, through the digitization of many old books and maps, Tartarian history soon made it back into the public consciousness. So while they certainly tried to erase and change our history, history isn't over. Thank you for watching, And special thanks to the guys from Ancient Historia.